Katie.
Hi all, and welcome. Just to let everyone know that we are being broadcast live on YouTube, and the broadcast will be available after this meeting for members of the public and press to view. We've got no members of the press or public here today, but any press or public watching can use footage from today's meeting, except where there are confidential or exempt items, which there are none today. We've received apologies from Councillor Shergill, and no others. Have we got any declarations of interest anyone would like to make? So agenda item 4 is just to agree the action notes of the meeting held on the 11th of January. Any issues with those? Happy to agree them. Yeah. And then agenda item number 5 is the action tracker, which I will have some updates on. So for me, the chair to explore whether it be appropriate for Nicola Turner, Director of Legacy for Commonwealth Games, to attend the meeting. I've spoken to Councillor Ward, Leader of the Council, as well, to help us engage with Nicola Turner, to invite her to a future committee meeting, and he will be doing that, and I'll follow that up. And then we'll also be following up Commonwealth Games Legacy, the review of the short, medium and long-term ambitions for the Council's legacy plan. We'll just be following up when that will be due. And we will be asking Dave Wagg about when the report on basketball courts will come to this committee, and then also chasing up when we'll receive a report from Sport England around the equipment gift around the city following the Commonwealth Games. Has anyone got any comments on the action tracker or questions? No, thank you. And that's agreed as it stands. And then we're just welcoming Councillor Mick Brown from the committee that we partner with for our inquiry. He chairs that committee. And also Erica Martin and Megan Byrne from the Active Wellbeing Society here today to give us a presentation, I believe, and there'll be an opportunity for comments and questions from members to assist in our evidence gathering. And there'll be a report to follow. Thank you, if you wish to.
So thank you for the invite. Obviously, we're here to talk about some of our experiences around disability and linked to more so from our point of view around being engaged in physical activity as opposed to the spectator element of it. So we are the active.
Just loading. Hang on. Sorry.
Apologies. I should have checked that Amelia was ready. Sorry.
Thank you. So yes, we are called the Active Wellbeing Society, often referred to as TORS if you kind of hear our name and the next slide, I will just go into a bit more detail. So we are a mutual and community-led, a member-led cooperative that was set up in 2018. So we launched the Wellbeing Service, the Active Wellbeing Service. We are kind of really around removing barriers to participation. That's kind of really when we kind of focus our work and work around the areas IMD 1 and 2, so in high deprivation, really around tackling inequalities, and promoting wellbeing and trying to kind of create more civically and physically active communities across the city, and also more so now across the country as well. We work in Essex. The kind of focus on what we do is actually we run free activity, so there's never a charge at the point of kind of where the recipient is involved with us. And that includes our sort of Learn to Ride programme, which we do through Big Birmingham Bikes. We do a lot of group exercise, and we have quite a large running and walking programme, as well as kind of our greening and growing work around engaging with green space and with how we sort of, growing and compost commentary work. as well as art and craft, so kind of quite a variety in terms of that. We're also really involved around our food support. So whether we're distributing during the pandemic, we were kind of heavily involved in Run Together, supporting the work around distributing the food parcels and sort of clothing. We have a community cafe, 2 community cafes across the city, and do a lot of cooking skills and outreach services as well. And we are also a warm hub as part of the council's work around that. So we have Ladywood, our share shack there. We have a warm hub that operates Friday. Part of the work we do is around community support. So we have a lot of work around active travel. Our bike programme is quite large, so we have a lot of engagement through the free bike giveaway. And so we close streets called the Active Streets programme, and engaging in green space as well. So whether it's physical activity or walks across the city. Our health programme is growing, and we have a large social prescribing and Listen and Connect, which is basically working around primary care networks and GP practices through referrals through GPs. And our Listen and Connect service again grew during the pandemic, so the phone referrals and befriending services, and that kind of connecting the sort of people on the phone then hopefully into physical activity or being civically active in the community. Because of the pandemic, our kind of that virtual offer, we've grown that now. So we have quite a large virtual programme. We recruited a virtual officer about 1.5 years ago who's grown that programme. So again, letting people try to remove those barriers to kind of being active and the isolation, not least because of disability or long-term health conditions that prevent people getting out of the house. And likewise, about 6 months ago, we recruited a disability and inclusion lead. We were very keen around promoting inclusivity within the organisation, but also with our community. So kind of looking at that and making sure that our programme is accessible to those that we engage with. We often have a line of sight to that physical activity. So although we have lots of programmes going on, we do work around our physical activity interventions. It might not always start with physical activity, it might start with food later, but we do sort of have that line of sight to that. That's probably kind of the main elements of what we do. So I'll pass on to Megan to talk a bit more about kind of the work around the disability.
Thanks, Monica. So we will touch on some of the programmes that she just mentioned during the presentation, but we just wanted to talk a little bit about how we've designed people into our services from the point of inception, from the idea of what the intervention might be, rather than kind of designing a service and then making adaptations or realising it's not accessible to certain groups. So we really rely on the kind of the consensus statement that kind of gave the permission for us to work with disabled people or people living with long-term health conditions who would think that that activity wasn't for them. Often GPs were worried to refer them into certain exercise programs or activity programs, but this consensus statement made it possible for people to have the confidence to know that activity is for them, and that's what we kind of base all of our planning around and interventions around, really. So we're aiming to create stability and space for people who want to be engaged and look after their care themselves. So it's about kind of empowering people. We stepped into kind of this space during the pandemic when we were asked to create a return to activity framework to make sure people could be active safely in that space where people were scared, people were afraid to come out. And so we really, it's really key to what we do is looking at talking to people and making sure that the offer that we're creating kind of designs people in rather than out. So our approach it's really important to like the engagement, I think, and the trust that we build in the community. So we co-design a lot of the activities with communities. We facilitate input and collaboration from service users and local partners to develop our offer. We develop more resilient, connected communities as a result. There's improved connections and relationships. So we're there to bridge that gap, hold that space for people to have a say and have an influence on the offer that is put into their spaces, I suppose, into their communities. There's a lot of kind of consultation fatigue in our community, so we really try and involve them and develop the offer with them, really. We look at influencing systems that shape the world, the kind of environment that we're in. And this obviously influences community cohesion, and social movements are created from that. But really, it's about enablement, and then creating other opportunities. So we operate in places of trust. So we operate in key practices, we operate in green spaces, in community centres, in places of worship, to create those avenues for people to come together and start their journey wherever they're at. So it might be that they become active through volunteering, and we really have a focus on empowering people to come in at whatever point they want. So there's lots of barriers to being active. There's quite a few there that are probably no surprise to you guys, but we've worked with my team who are kind of on the ground delivering interventions day in, day out, and those are some of the key ones, really. And time often comes up, and it's around the perception of time. So we've created an offer that is, we've got sessions 7 days a week in the evenings, before work as well, but also we have that on-demand option with our virtual wellbeing programme. So we really try and work with communities so that they prioritise their health, and make time. So it's kind of that perception of time when we talk about barriers. Travel's a really interesting one. So it's not kind of about getting the inability to kind of get transport there. When we're looking at people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, often their condition changes, and they'll be able to go from overnight from being able to get themselves to somewhere driving and have their licence taken from them, or mobility decrease, and that leads to kind of a lack of confidence with travel. So it's about being aware of that, of how people are getting to the activities, and they may become inactive due to a health condition just because they're unable to now physically get to a space. Trust is a huge barrier. We build and create trust with local communities because we turn up, we say, we're going to do something, and we support them to do that. The consistency and persistence is an interesting one. So we have to be there week in, week out, regardless of the weather, regardless of staff availability. We will cover the sessions, and it's really important that people know that the sessions are there week in, week out. We use a text anywhere service, which it sends weekly messages to remind people where we're going to be, that the session's happening. And this is all kind of about encouragement and changing their behaviour to turning up to sessions. There's a lot of underrepresentation in some of the marketing still that goes out, in some of the employers that work for different organisations and partner organisations that are involved in the co-creation of sessions and services. So we work with minority groups to ensure our offer is inclusive and accessible. Our workforce is reflective of that, and we like to our marketing and our sessions to represent the communities that we're working within. And we're quite proud of the work that we're doing there. There's a lot of preconceived ideas, obviously, that activity is not for everybody and that they can't take part. And it's important that we listen to those fears and empower people to be able to do it for themselves. Language and communication is a huge barrier. When I think about the Commonwealth Games and some of the access to people with a hearing impairment, for example, or sensory impairment. I'm not sure how inclusive it was, how engaging it was for those groups of people to be able to turn up to an event and enjoy it in the same way somebody without a disability may have done. And obviously there's a lack of motivation that it just isn't. It's been so long, people are not engaged anymore. So disability can be defined in two ways, I should say, sorry. A medical model and the social model. We just flick the... Okay. Yeah, brilliant. So equality for disabled people and the removal of barriers to participation should be considered from the outset of all projects, removing the need to respond to individual disabled people. So that's a quote really that states what our approach to activity, and we appreciate and work with both of the models, the medical model. The medical model of disability presents it as a problem of the person directly caused by an illness or a health condition, and the social model looks at disability presents as a socially created problem. A person is disabled by their environment, so we try and have these models in mind when we're developing our services. Yeah, so just touching on some of our projects, they're open to everybody and anybody. We have people come with multiple health conditions. Our virtual wellbeing programme is attended by a lot of people with long-term health conditions, but we work with partners. Actually, I'll touch that on the next slide. I think we've got one on the virtual, haven't we? So the virtual programme, there's a timetable, if you can see it, I think that was last year now, but there's a weekly timetable that goes out, and we've nurtured partnerships with hospitals, the Birmingham Museums Trust, lots of different people to engage those who maybe can't show up for whatever reason physically. And we've had some real success with people waiting for bariatric treatment, people who've gone through brain injury, the community mental health teams, and people suffering with other long-term health conditions such as cancer. They attend our weekly programme for that social engagement, as well as some physical activity should they wish. So it's a really integral part of our delivery that we've continued to deliver since the pandemic, and the council are fundamental to supporting that. Next one, please. So Community Connect was a programme, was a mental health and physical activity engagement programme. So Erica spoke about the Listen and Connect work that was kind of born out of the pandemic. So this supports people who are suffering with low mood, or who want some other support service, someone to talk to than a mental health team or adult social care. And so they call in and they have a variety of week support with a person on the phone, but then the engagement needs to be more than that. So the Community Connect programme looks at bringing people out of their homes, out of their spaces to engage in physical activity. It's amazing, the programme is. It kind of offers that individualised support, which again, for people suffering kind of long-term health conditions and mental health problems, they really need that kind of to be at the centre of their care, and that's what this project does. It kind of brings people out, but with that support of that Listen and Connect worker. I wanted to share Lorraine's story, and she's just one of the people actually who she came to our walking group and could come along in her chair but wanted to do some activity for herself. So we created a seated exercise group out in the park, and she came week in, week out, and her hopes were to be able to independently get out of her chair. And she was able to, by coming each week, be able to have that independence of improving her health by coming. It's the only time she's kind of without her carer when she comes to the session. So it's much more than just being able to be active. It kind of helps with every part of her health. So she's just one example, really. Of, anybody can come. We wouldn't turn anybody away. And she, says that it's helped her in countless ways. She's got more independence now. So it's that whole journey, really, that whole person-centred approach that we have. I think it's back over to you.
Yes. So just a couple more examples around some of our programmes. So particularly thinking around our active travel. So as I mentioned before, our Big Birmingham Bike programme in the city. So we've given away just around 8,000 bikes now as part of our giveaway. And within that, we obviously sort of look around our inclusion and disability offer. So we do work with the Hockley Day Centre, and they have sort of 9 adaptive bikes that we're providing. Obviously, we make sure we maintain them because, you know, clearly there's a cost around maintenance, and some of the adaptive bikes are a bit more complicated around the mechanics. So our 2 of our mechanics look after those and keep them serviced. So that's kind of something that just sits with those, and the service users can use those as and when that they want as part of some of their sessions. And we operate the bikeability programme across the city. So within that fleet of bikes, we have 5 adaptive bikes, and we're kind of looking to kind of increase that number all the time. So when we go into a school to deliver the session, often in a mainstream school, you'll have a couple of the you need that extra support, whether it's a trike or a recumbent bike, just that allows them a bit more stability because it might have mobility challenges or a long-term health condition. So you know, we do that in mainstream, but also we've worked with 12 schools, those with a disability. So some of those like Queensbury and Selly Oak Trust, for example. So to make sure that we do sort of take the bikeability programme to other schools as well. We've recently been working with the Combined Authority. We had some funding as part of the Commonwealth Games for Cycling for Everyone. And as part of that, across the Combined Authority area, we've had 25 adaptive bikes that we've been using across the different areas as part of a loan. So working with community groups and also with individuals to offer those out, again, to promote their kind of activity, where they're using it just to get, you know, to get out and get active, or, you know, help them with their mobility. So that project's sort of still going on. We kind of haven't got any outcomes yet, but we know that they kind of be really well received, the idea of they were working across the Combined Authority area. You might have heard in any e-bikes, so obviously kind of about the sort of electric bikes. We've referred, had 9 patients referred as part of that special prescribing programme through the GP practice, which we've worked on for one of the team leads on that. And you can see we've had 7 women and 2 men so far. And again, you know, the majority of those have a health condition. Often those with diabetes or obesity, it just helps them reintroduce into physical activity. And often they will then go on to use a standard bike. If not, obviously we have got the e-bikes there that, you know, will kind of remain. They can use those. Next slide. I mentioned this. So another of our projects is called Bikes on Prescription again. So part of the referral process through a GP or through our link workers that are across the city. And there's a number of reasons that kind of this again was kind of really born out of the referrals through GPs, but also through COVID, where, you know, people were feeling socially isolated. It is really good for some of the long-term health conditions. You know, working with the GP, we know that there's a burden on the GP often. So often people that are coming in for other reasons, referring to the bike actually is seeing that they don't go to the GP as often, and they're using their bike and getting out and about. So we've had some really good positive stories on our Bikes on Prescription programme. This is an example just in terms of some stats. So our social prescribing programme that I mentioned, which is referred to the GP, you can see that the types of referrals that we've had since April last year, and a breakdown of those referrals. So often, you know, they will have more than one. So the sort of depression, moderate depression and anxiety, but also loneliness and isolation, coupled with, you know, weight management, long-term health conditions. So a number of these are kind of, there's more than one referral reason they come through, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea about the types of referrals we get through the programme, and they often do accompany a health condition or a disability. And then just another example in terms of a programme, we recently launched primary care pedals that Omni Practice are working in partnership with them. We think it's the first primary care hub, certainly in the city, we think probably across the country. So we have a bike container based at the surgery, and again, people can refer through to that. And we have a team that go down and do lead rides, confidence building, fix-it sessions. So our mechanic goes down every week, and you can bring your own bike, but also you can use one of our bikes on site. And that ranges from the one-to-one support if you need to actually learn to ride, but also looking at group rides as well, just at your own pace. Again, occasionally the pace of that person. And that really gets the local asset, space behind on Nearing Yardley. It just means that we can kind of sort of bring them out and go onto the blueberries and get free space and the cycle routes on the canal. And it also creates that social opportunity as well. So often with our activities and when we work with cohorts and interventions, it would include a social bit. So at the start, whether we have, you know, drinks, tea and coffee, and at the end of the session, just creates an opportunity to kind of talk and connect with one another. And then just wanted to end with some of our key recommendations.
Yeah, no, it's kind of linked to the barriers really, but we do work with people in maybe a different way than some, but we do try and understand the whole person and what kind of will encourage them to come to an activity session. We really recommend that there's representation of all of the different and wonderful communities in our city, and that's through kind of the volunteers and the instructors, through to the marketing of the sessions as well. Again, I mentioned we, you know, design people into services rather than some can be designed out of that. So it's really important that at the inception of an idea, the community is engaged, or the group who are trying to put the service forward, that they're having a say in how the intervention is set up and how it might be run. Often that's quite a brave space to step into, but we really see the rewards of doing that. And one thing that came out from our staff members who have a disability or a long-term health condition, they would really welcome like a buddy scheme. So people with a lived experience there to support them, especially maybe through the games. There could have been that opportunity where people were buddied up with somebody and they could attend some of the sessions with them, or, you know, it really is an invaluable kind of scheme that, you know, could be set up and would have a lot of benefits to people with a disability or long-term health condition. Again, meet people where they're at. Don't assume you know kind of where they need to be. That's what we always have to do with ourselves, is kind of always listen, keep listening, be inclusive in communication. We have one of our employees who she's profoundly deaf, and still, you know, as an organisation, we're learning how to make our communication inclusive, but time and time and again, a lot of information out there isn't, and again, it designed to be what out of service or interest. And be open to learning always, I think, is what we kind of live by, isn't it, as an organisation? But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Erica and Megan. It's time for some questions and comments now. Councillor Bing.
I've got 3 points. One is that you say that you try to reach community through volunteers. So what about communities that feel alienated and actually they would be less reluctant, they'd be more reluctant to actually volunteer in the first place? What would you sort of do to try and reach those communities?
I think the kind of one of the things you mentioned before is about building the trust. So often we'll kind of go into the community because we're not the experts in the room. You know, they know their community, they are there. So, you know, we're there to sort of work with, to amplify the opportunity. So, I mean, a good example is the walking and running programme. Often people will come on an intervention and end up offering to volunteer because they enjoy that session. So we don't go in looking for the volunteer, and I think often it just comes out organically, probably the wrong word, but, you know, they sort of see the value of that programme and they sort of end up sort of offering, want to get involved, you know, in what we're doing, with support from sort of training. So we don't ever sort of go in, you're looking at it, but yeah, that does sort of often come out. We do have a volunteer team, so we have a pathway and a system that they can log on to. Again, we have support for that, but it's not something we presume that people would want to necessarily do straight away.
I think our most successful examples are where we go to an organisation who's kind of trusted in that area. In Aston, for example, we partnered with New Hope Global, and they had a group of women who they knew wanted to get active. So we trained their member of staff to be kind of that walk leader or that volunteer walk leader, and invited the women out. And then we attended with that with one of our staff members. And then, like Erica said, you get kind of the people who find they enjoy it and they want to do it. So there's different approaches we take. Often it's kind of finding that trusted source in the community, finding out if they want that in general. The walking programme is quite a popular one, but then we also have different levels of entry with the volunteering programme. So you can just kind of make the coffee, or you can actually sign up to receive a level 2 in leadership and running. So we give people qualifications. So I think we're successful in that sense by offering a variety of opportunities, but going into that trusted source first and working with them. What would their community want? Is this something they would want? How does it look like for them? Because we have a variety of of offers as well. Some things are more informal. They might not want us to deliver it. They might just want to meet themselves. So we give them the skills to do that. So yeah, I'd say it's not just kind of road raiding anything. We know what the communities want. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
So you said the bikes on prescription, which is going quite well. Can you give me do you have any statistics about inner city areas and how many referrals you have compared to the other more leafier outer city areas?
Yeah, maybe obviously our main sort of we focus on about the provider is the kind of line we want to primarily. I can certainly get some across, like some description is sort of still growing. Say Omnia is kind of one example that we've got that, the hub there now because it's successful. Yeah, so we can certainly get some stats for you because we do obviously have a surveys that are done as well as part of that. So we'll have the information there which we can share with you.
Yeah. We're predominantly, there's a big focus in kind of East Birmingham at the moment just because of where the GPs have spoken up the kind of the loudest, but we can definitely get that information, can't we?
Absolutely.
One question
Yeah.
before I moved on to someone else.
You did say that you've acknowledged the disability and ethnic minorities. What do you do for the LGBT plus community and also to involve more the inner city areas? But I think you've covered the inner city one. So
yeah. I think our virtual programme, from some of the consultation feedback we've done, that community have said they're able to kind of show up to those sessions because they don't physically feel they can show up to other physical sessions. We've done some testing and learning with a women's only offer, and we've educated our kind of instructors, and it's not just somebody who maybe visually identifies as a woman, or people would perceive them identifying as a woman. People can kind of present masculine and come to a women's only session. So we've really done some exploratory work with the virtual platform because that was a space that the community has said they feel safe. And again, we're rolling that out into some of our other sessions where they are for everybody, no matter how you kind of present and how you turn up. We're also working with our disability and inclusion lead to deliver kind of light touch British Sign Language training. So they've got those soft skills to welcome and include people who may have a hearing impairment. So we're working on it constantly. We're listening. But those are some of the examples that spring to mind.
Yeah, I mean, whilst we are as inclusive, and that's why we recruited our disability and inclusion lead. I don't think we think of any sessions that are specifically for LGBT+, but I think our approach is around inclusivity, and that's part of why we wanted to recruit a lead, because it's about looking inwards as well. I think we don't all have that lived experience. So while we again hope that our sessions, and we recognise the thing around sort of how we can be inclusive, but we don't have particular sessions for that. But we do work with partners like Sport Birmingham as well. We obviously work with sports clubs in other areas, so we can also signpost. Whilst we don't have something ourselves, we can signpost to other partners and stakeholders. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you for the presentation. It was really inclusive, so thank you for that. It was your third slide on designing people into services. Yeah. We refer to disabled people and people living with long-term health conditions. I'm aware through contacts with people in social striving that it can be sort of difficult to get men as a group to get involved in these sort of activities. And looking at your pictures, they tend to be predominantly women, apart from the physical activity sessions, which tended to be younger men. So I'm just wondering how you sort of get linkages for older men who may have a disability or a long-term health condition that the GP may want to refer on, and they feel, well, I'm just too old to do this, or I'm not going to take that up, or I'm going to go maybe to a session, and then I don't take it any further.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand IT stuff, so I'm not really going to get involved in the virtual stuff. So it's how you manage to get that linkage. And I'm not saying there's an easy answer to that. It's just a question that's occurred to me on several occasions before today.
It's a great question, actually. By default, I found that, and interestingly, our Listen and Connect service has nearly 60% of men, kind of in 40 to 60-year-olds who are using that service. And maybe I didn't explain it that well, but it's kind of practical advice how to manage low mood and maybe where the activity sessions are. So we've kind of got a captive audience in that sense, but I think we're exploring them different walking sports, aren't we, at the moment? And maybe they're not going to their GPs, so maybe we need to find another way of kind of targeting them as well. But no, it is an area that we don't have a representation in. I don't think at some of our groups. So
I think it's that thing around intersectionality where, you know, there's kind of these discrete kind of characteristics around gender and ability and sexuality and race is sort of, you know, not making sure we don't design out actually one of those areas, which probably an example is men at a certain age, where we think we've got interventions like we talked about the walking rugby, but also we have now got a growing team around our greening and growing work, which actually do encourage men to come along. So we have a colleague that does, you know, he's kind of actually coming through having low mood and now works for us, and he does do kind of engagement with men actually around walking and doing it around greening work. So yeah, it's an area that, you know, it's, like I said, it's a good point. Whilst we do engage with that cohort, probably aren't necessarily services focused as much on just men only, for example.
Just make a comment about that. I'm not going to mention the organisation or the area, but there was one social prescribing organisation that managed to get older men, and this is 50 plus, in through GP referrals into a walking and photography group.
Okay.
Yeah, and the photographers, they're fortunate they got a piece of open land close by. Develop people's interest in photography, which is good for people's mental health and engagement. And the physical activity of walking became a mindfulness activity in itself, and also increased their overall physical health.
Yeah, and actually we have done that historically when we were part of the wellbeing service in the council. It's that physical activity by stealth. So we started off with the interest in the photography bit, and then the walking bit became incidental, but actually we're physically active. So, you know, we have looked at those sort of options before. So we do a number of different walking, and lots of them they're obviously never mentioned. But yeah, that's a
Absolutely. Have a look into that area to get some of that going, because we haven't thought about that, I don't think, recently.
Trying to get back to some sort of level of activity and getting people out has been the focus. But yeah, I think that would be interesting to explore actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation.
I'm very supportive of the principles of the Active Wellbeing Society, and to declare an interest, I was successful before I was in a councillor getting a big Birmingham bike. My only thing is they're bright orange, but you know, and I cycle in the summertime to and from my ward on it. So there you go. But so thank you for that. And you did talk about 8,000 bikes, which I think is a fantastic programme. But I am interested on the reach of the rest of your work. You know, you've been going for what? I'm just looking at our story, your pathway. You know, it's 15 years now. Would you say, is your geographical spread and the number? You know, what are the outcomes really? How many people have you reached, and how many wards do you reach on all of the activities that you're working on?
We actually, for the Active Wellbeing Society, we launched in 2018, so we spun out then, and we've sort of.
Yes, it's sort of previous incarnations, hasn't it, to 2008.
So just kind of say as towards as an entity, we span out of the local authority and the cooperative. So, I mean, again, we can get some sort of the numbers and stuff. You know, we do focus, say, in IMD 1 and 2. So kind of we try and focus around the areas of deprivation. Obviously, they are across the city. And then we are now working nationally. So we do have 4 bike projects in Essex now, working with Active Essex.
Well, I was just going to come on to ask you about that, because it talks about Essex and Devon, and I've got to say I'm not touched by any of your work. I mean, you just mentioned East Birmingham. I'm not, the social prescribing. So I'm just, of the 69 wards, what's your geographic spread and how many people are you reaching?
We'll definitely be able to unpick that a little bit from the kinetic data that we have. But I think with the local delivery pilot, there's ward specific there, isn't there, with how many? I used to look after kind of the West, and it was kind of 11 out of the 12 wards. We're in kind of over 50 GP practices that spread kind of all over the city. There's a sprinkling in the north, not so much in the west because there's different providers of the social prescribing service. So we don't have a lot of reach in the west of the city, I'd say, as much as we do kind of in the east. But we do have a lot of work kind of in South Birmingham and in kind of Erdington and the north. But we can definitely get those figures because the reach is probably
within pockets
insane.
Across the city.
Yeah.
Again, you know, so I think, we've got this sort of focus in the east because of the sort of the nature of, and we do work with partners as well, so work perhaps where we haven't got capacity to go in because, you know, we are, you know, a growing sort of organisation, but, you know, although we have frontline delivery, we can't be obviously everywhere because, you know, there is a great need across the city. So we do try and focus around obviously, you know, the funding or where we have kind of interest. The LDP covers 6 areas of the city. We can certainly share information.
Yeah.
We have an impact report we've done recently, which we can share as well with the members. So,
you know, rightly or wrongly, by sort of senses that it's small groups of people in small areas of the city. That may be wrong. So it's just, I'd be interested what your geographical reach is and the number.
Yeah. And anywhere that we're kind of not or don't have a presence, we're looking to kind of reach out and help support those communities as well if they fit the kind of areas of deprivation, because we're not everywhere and we'd like to be.
With our resource, we do as much as we can and reach as many people as we can, but obviously we can't be everywhere for everyone, so we do have to kind of focus. But you know, there's obviously always room to have conversations and focus where perhaps we haven't reached before. But we can certainly share.
You're willing to come to ward meetings, aren't you? I think we were.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Talk to people in ward meetings.
We're due to attend Karen Cheney's meeting actually around with the board, the lead, so we can certainly share information there as well.
Any questions from the members? I've got a question, and do feel free
to consider your own questions while I'm asking. So what kind of adaptations do you provide, and are there any challenges you find in providing any adaptations that you may need to provide for any of your service users who need those adaptations?
So bikes is probably a little bit separate, but with the work that my team do focused on people with long-term health conditions, a lot of it is kind of ensuring their knowledge and their skill set. They're able to kind of welcome anybody with any sort of health condition, so they have that expertise to be able to safely deliver the activity. I think sometimes there's a lack of indoor space maybe to be able to do that, and it's difficult because I think we're so open to everybody being able to come. There's not, I wouldn't say there's no any barriers, but we do try and make sure anyone can come in and take part. So it's having that flexibility and the confidence in my team to be able to do that. But for the bikes, I think there's probably more challenges like the physical.
Yeah, I think all of our services, as you said, with the bikes in particular, there'd obviously be a one-to-one with, learn to ride, people doing that one-to-one support. So sort of particularly these are incumbent bikes or the trikes, it is a one-to-one support. So where we've got capacity where we can, we'll absolutely adapt. And, when we've done the example we've heard about Lorraine, we'll do chair-based exercise, even in our community cafes. We have a session around chair-based for those that perhaps aren't mobile. So, we're always thinking about how we can adapt our services. If we've got the right skill set, but we're not always the expert in the room, so we might work with other organisations that perhaps do bring that expertise, or that we can upskill and train people in that area as well.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chair. You meant to have the answer this question immediately available. I'm just wondering for people who've got long-term health conditions who you've had referred through social prescribing through the GP, have you any information in terms of whether the actual linkage into the programs that you guys run actually reduces the number of occasions they refer themselves back to the GP?
Yeah. I mean, particularly through the bikes, we do surveys on the bike subscription, so we can find that out. Some of them are just like through that journey. But we do see that the reports around reduced, particularly around diabetes, obesity, around religion. So we can certainly find out some examples of that.
Okay, and certainly that would be great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, just a very quick, short one. What's the best way to get in contact with you guys if, say, we have an organisation in our wards or a group of people in the wards who we may think will work well with you and your sort of your values and of course the principles.
And so we've got a website with the contact information, but we've also got, we can link some of our specs as well, just got the contact details.
And our inquiry that we're leading on is around disability access, as you know, to sport physical activity for both spectators and participants. Are there any recommendations that you would perhaps like us to make to the council's cabinet and executive? Anything that you can think of the top of your head?
I mean, we've obviously got the examples around some of it, so we can obviously, I think we've got the presentation. So they were kind of some of the main things that they were talking to our users and some of our kind of colleagues with lived experience of disability. So I think that's what affected, some of our kind of those,
Or anything specifically you want the council to do that might help you as an organisation to deliver?
We'll go and kind of have that conversation with colleagues if that's okay.
Yeah.
If anything above and beyond that, really like.
Any final comments before we move on? No? Thank you very much to both of you. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll continue that dialogue as well. And I'll be in touch after this meeting as well. Thank you very much to both. You can vacate if you want to. So that's always an awkward bit. Can't wait for the meeting. Thank you. Yeah. Just allow Maria to settle and then we'll start the next one. Thank you to both of you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for
So welcome to Maria Gavin, Assistant Director for Quality and Improvement. She'll be here to talk to us about our inquiry and how that may, how her directorate may help us there with any information. Then there'll be an opportunity for us to provide comment and questions as well.
Thank you. And I think Amelia's kindly agreed to run through the slides that I sent through. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Gavin, Assistant Director, Adult Social Care, and I led on behalf of adult social care users the work that we did as a directorate to help ensure really that the adults we support within the community were able to benefit from the games in line with the ambition of the council that every citizen should benefit. Thank you. So just a quick overview of what I'll cover this afternoon. Just a quick reminder of the role of adult social care. Some of you will have met me before. I presented before the games on some of the ways adult social care were engaging. So some of this will be an update for you on the engagement group, the organising committee accessibility forum, which we were part of, our reach networks, some work we did with Access Able and Changing Places, how we look to engage in the cultural and community programme, how we supported adult social care users to engage in the volunteering and employment benefits the games had to offer, and some of the wider work around enhancing the wellbeing of adult social care users, and the Queen's Baton Relay, and some of the work we're still trying to continue. So just a quick reminder, the role of adult social care, we have duties to ensure that citizens who meet the adult social care threshold and the financial thresholds receive services that prevent their care needs from becoming more serious or delay or impact the needs, ensure people have access to information, advice and guidance, and that we make sure there's a range of high quality choice of services within the market, so residential homes, care homes, home support, direct payments. Thank you. So as part of the games, we saw one of our main roles was to try and connect the users and the community groups that we work with in adult social care. So for people with quite complex needs often, that we could really raise that awareness, enthusiasm and engagement around the games, so that people we supported and the organisations we work with, funny enough, Tours is one of those, felt that the games was something that they and their users could benefit from too. It was a games for them. We wanted to make sure the directorate supported the corporate ambition that residents gained the most from the games, and really to support and share information about opportunities and work with organisations and the organising committee to ensure that they were as accessible as possible for people with disabilities or additional needs. And to do that, a lot of our support was making sure information was shared, working with bits of the Commonwealth Games infrastructure to organise specific sessions for the community groups and citizens we work with. So, for example, on volunteering, we had a couple of webinars with those organisations present, so our community groups and citizens could find out more about how they could engage as volunteers or in the employment. Thank you. One of the roles we took as well was, you appreciate probably even more so than myself, the role of the organising committee in the direct delivery of the games and in some of those ceremonies that surrounded that. So I represented adult social care on that organising committee accessibility forum. And that accessibility forum was largely made up of third sector voluntary organisations who have expertise around what would help to make the games accessible for people with disabilities. So Sense, MenCat, Level Playing Field, organisations that either represented individual sort of needs of citizens or whose aspiration was to ensure that all sport and leisure is more accessible to everybody. And through the Accessibility Forum, we were able to engage with West Midlands Transport around like the redesign of Perry Bar train station, the work around the Alexander Stadium refurbishment, Queen's Baton Relay, the volunteering opportunities. The Accessibility Forum was one of those groups that various sectors of the council or the Games Committee approached for advice on how to make the games and the surrounding cultural festival as accessible as possible. Thank you. So to help do that, I mentioned we developed the links with our community organisations so we could share and facilitate those webinars and contacts. We have about 400 organisations and individuals who are part of that reach network at the time. That included our charities and voluntary sector agencies who work with us through neighbourhood networks or our prevention third sector schemes to support people in the community. Groups supporting people with disabilities. Our Pure project, which is an employment project to help people furthest from the job market into employment, and that includes care leavers and people with disabilities. Parents and carers organisations, our own day centres and the day centres who support adults with additional needs, and Migration Forum because we're part of the City of Sanctuary service. And that was developed really that we had a means through which we could share information, answer queries, organise, as I say, webinars and help people make the links with some of the larger bodies who are involved in organising the games or the employment and volunteering. Thank you. We also work with Access Able and continue now on the back of that to work with our own tourism service in the council around making the city as accessible as possible. So Access Able are a voluntary organisation who have web information with very, very detailed access information to venues, shops, leisure facilities across the country. We've been very keen to promote organisations working with Access Able to make sure that citizens and their families know whether or not they would be able to go to that place, whether it would be suitable for somebody with autism, whether the doors would be wide enough and the lifts for their wheelchairs. So really, really detailed information, but information which is really critical, that makes the difference for an individual and their families being able to go and engage in an activity or not. So we work to promote that. We work with our own leisure services. We're really receptive. On the back of that, all our own leisure services and our franchise leisure services have developed that accessibility guides. And now that the Alexander Stadium, I think, is being handed back to us, or back to us any day, is again to get that level of detailed guide done on the post-games, post-overlay Alexander Stadium. We also, on the back of that, are linking with Ben Howe from Tourism, who is doing work with tourist sites within the city, again to develop information on accessibility. So we're linking in with Ben and the work he's doing. Our interest is more from the citizens of Birmingham, but if it's accessible to tourists, it's accessible to our own citizens as well. So we didn't want to miss the opportunity there to make sure that that work takes account of the need of our own Birmingham citizens too. Thank you. Again, one of the facilities that can make the difference between individuals and families being able to go to a facility is the availability of accessible toilets, particularly changing places, which are toilet facilities that you can see on the screen there, large spaces with changing tables, showers, the type of facilities that you would need above and beyond an accessible normal sort of toilet that you'd see in venues, that for people with some of our most complex, profound needs, really need that type of changing environment to make a venue accessible. So we put in a bid to a national scheme, and we were successful in being awarded a number of grants that we're working with Botanical Gardens, Maincap, and a third site, Rohith Pavilions, who were successful bidders to look at trying to get additional facilities built into their spaces to enhance their use for people with disabilities. Thank you. We were very keen as well that the cultural and community programme that accompanied the Games was equally accessible to people with disabilities or people adult social care supports. And even preceding the Games, that was sort of one of our passions, that everybody in the city has the opportunity to engage in the marvellous sort of cultural and the, particularly around the Games, around the festival that accompanied that. So we have a culture officer seconded to adult social care 1 day a week. They work particularly with our neighbourhood networks. We have 10 neighbourhood networks who work with voluntary sector organisations on the ground that support adult social care. And that culture officer helps to make sure that we're working with those organisations, and the culture department are working with adult social care to look at those offers through that lens of accessibility. And that's something we continue to do now. It's still part of our ongoing vision for how we look at that community and cultural offer. So that support, it continues to be facilitated through those links with culture. Thank you. As part really of the Games as well, we were very keen to use our reach network to make sure that some of the really big celebrations, the opening and closing ceremonies, the Queen's Baton Relay, had engagement from adult social care users. So things like Critical Mass. Critical Mass was the citywide programme aimed at getting sort of younger adults to engage and be part of the production and performances around the opening and closing ceremonies. So again, we were very much promoting awareness of our groups and Critical Mass, as well, of the opportunity that could provide to some of the people we work with in adult social care to facilitate their engagement. Thank you. Volunteering and job opportunities was really important, particularly for our Pure project, that support into employment. And again, we facilitated those discussions through the accessibility forum with the organisers of the volunteering schemes to help as part of that forum, help them to be shaped in a way that made them accessible, and also then to link in and offer those specific webinars that link to the volunteering scheme to our third sector organisations and individuals who are interested in volunteering, so they could have those questions, reassurance, and make it very clear this opportunity is for them. And we did have quite a number of citizens with disabilities, with learning disabilities, who were very successful volunteers in the games, and where those opportunities give them something to sort of build on in terms of that future skill and confidence for the next step on their journey in volunteering or employment. Thank you. I mentioned as well about the Queen's Baton Relay. So again, we were very keen to promote that sites that support people with adult social care were both represented on the Queen's Baton Relay group, who made the decision around who the Queen's Baton Relay baton bearers would be, as well as sites that the Queen's Baton Relay would have change or stop at. So linking in with Queen's Baton to identify social care sites that we felt would be really good bases. I think some of them were bases. I think our homeless services, St Basil's, were one of those sites that, again, we were working to make the game seen as inclusive and to include those citizens and sites within that sort of relays routes. Thank you. And as part of in adult social care, we obviously didn't have like the big infrastructure projects. We weren't building stadiums or housing or roads, but we did have a small sum of money from the council, a few tens of thousands, and we looked to invest that in ways which would help promote the health and well-being of adult social care users. So 2 areas that we worked on there. One particularly was around supporting care leavers who come into our transition services, really to learn about healthy lifestyle, cooking healthy on a budget, culturally appropriate meals, through something called Change Kitchen, which helps young people learn, particularly where they've been in care services for a long time, help people to learn how to sort of shop efficiently and cook nutritious and healthy food on a budget. And we've also been looking at the funding to increase the amount of accessible cycling opportunities that are available to citizens we work with in the community. Thank you. Okay, so that's really sort of like a whistle-stop tour of some of the work we were involved in, but happy to take any questions.
Just your sort of conclusion on how successful all the work was that you did, and what was your learning to take forward, in legacy terms, really?
Yeah, I think it was very successful. In fact, the LGA have contacted us because when they went to some of the events, the local government association, some of them really noticed the number of people, say particularly with disabilities or learning disabilities, involved in the games from an organisational volunteering ceremonies point of view. So they've asked to do a case study on Birmingham to see how we supported people with learning disabilities and autism to be part of the games. I think what it really helped to highlight for us, and part of that legacy, is that joint working across the council, working more with tourism, working more with our own leisure services, having that voice in that planning and development side that we can continue to promote awareness of how to ensure that anything we're doing is as accessible as possible, and to really keep our citizens with disabilities on that radar, on that agenda when people are thinking about how we develop or you know, how we look at tourism or our own leisure services.
Would you continue that work? Because I'm not sure how well Birmingham does in terms of its accessibility, its accessible tourism.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't scoring so highly, was it, before the game?
Yeah.
But I'm sure this has helped that. Would you continue that work?
Yes, yeah, we're continuing to work with tourism services now and with the Games Legacy side around that delivery. And I think it's really helped strengthen those links. Yeah, thank you.
A question, and feel free to continue to think of questions while I'm asking. So you mentioned that using Access Able as a data source. We've got a few organisations who have talked about open data for very similar things, such as Sport Birmingham, and we've also got the Council City Observatory.
Yeah.
And so I have perhaps a question and a concern really that there are perhaps a bit too much going on from various different organisations of a very similar nature. And actually, if one of those organisations or data platforms doesn't give all the data, I think it then makes that's a barrier in itself. If someone has to go to multiple different places to find the full information they need for a venue or an activity.
Yeah.
And kind of the joined up approach that perhaps might be needed, rather than as a council recommending using different platforms and services, especially when we are developing and continuing to develop one of our own kind of platforms.
Yeah. I think we're very keen in adult social care that we direct people to whatever the best source of information is. We're not particularly linked to Access Able if the council was developing something better. I think in terms of things like the observatory, when I've had a look at that, I think it's quite rich in population data. But if I was going to Aston Villa for an event, I don't think it's at the moment built to say, well, the ramp's this deep and the door's that wide. So, but I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things we're part of an innovation pilot with Steamhouse, which is Birmingham City University, is looking, our challenge to them, it's part of a challenge to SME IT companies to work with the council to help address issues. One of our key things, Councillor Deakin, is how do people find out information quickly and easily when it is in so many different locations? So how do we support citizens to do that in a way that means they can quickly and easily find the right thing? Because I think you're absolutely right. The risk is there's so much information that it's hard for individuals to know where to go. But I think the level of detail on Access Able isn't something I've seen anywhere other than their sites.
Perhaps there is a directorate that's something to feed into Richard Brooks and others around
definitely
the City Observatory.
It's a really good point.
Because it is something that I've suggested before. We've met with him over developing the City Observatory to include kind of cultural and physical activity opportunities. And actually, if we are going to do that, then there's an argument that we can include that information.
That's really. We have been advocating much the same about expanding the observatory so that includes information on disability and that. So
we can talk further about
very welcome that.
Any other questions? Councillor B.
Councillor B.
Very good presentation skills.
Thank you.
I might add. I did actually enjoy listening to you.
Good.
Okay. How many day centres do we have across the 69 wards? Is there one in every ward at least?
No. So Birmingham City Council runs it's 10 day centres ourselves. There are 40 to 50 independent day centres, which would have a spread across the city. But they are independent day centres. We use quite a lot of them, but we wouldn't necessarily be the sole user of all of them. We work with corporate services through our Connectors support site, which is part of our Neighbourhood Networks link, to try and make sure that our sites have that geographical reference to where support is found and where support is available, and then obviously to work on gaps in that. We've probably got a better so it depends really, because younger adult services tend to be larger, more complex services, whereas services for older adults, it's often not a day centre. It might often be a voluntary sector organisation who organise like an activity and food or, different types of services. But in the past might have been a traditional older adults day centre, but which have moved on now to a different, more diverse level of support. So we map that through our neighbourhood networks, and our neighbourhood networks are in every locality and area.
Brown.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for that. There's a couple of sort of link points. I think I recall you saying at the beginning about some of the work disability-wise you've been looking to Birmingham Botanical Gardens.
Yes. Changing places. They were one of our changing place toilet bid sites.
My comment about that before I go on to neighbourhood networks would be, I've taken people there who've got a physical disability, so you're wheelchair bound.
Yeah.
And it was in this case, it was a learning disability.
Yeah.
And it's just physically, it's just easy to get somebody around who's got a learning disability. I think so. I'm not saying nothing's been done, but I think for people who are wheelchair bound,
yeah,
they are extremely limited.
Yeah.
So that facility that they can actually access.
I think you're right, and I think that's part of what they're trying to look at. Is improving that, Councillor Brown.
Obviously, they're constrained by the layout of a lot of their glass houses.
Yeah.
But even outside, it's not necessarily an easy area to get around. And about the neighbour network scheme,
yeah,
I've linked into the two of them. They do provide a really, really good service. They do try to get people engaged in sports and other activities, both for physical and emotional wellbeing issues. I just think sometimes the organisations they link into aren't necessarily geographically in the best spot for people to access, and don't necessarily have got the upgraded facilities yet to enable disabled people to use them. So again, if I was taking somebody who got a learning disability, because they're more often allowed to be physically more able, it'd be easier to get them in and get them engaged and stuff. So I think there's still a fair way to go in terms of DDA regulations and compliance.
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Brown. I think you're absolutely right. It's one of our sort of, burning torches is to keep raising awareness of the need to make the city more accessible to everyone. And that isn't just our nice big glossy bull rings and things. It's the local facilities.
Obviously with the DDA stuff, it's expensive to install.
Yeah.
You can adjust your building to make the disability friendly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown.
Yes, so Maria, I just wanted to ask, in terms of obviously the Commonwealth Games was an amazing event. We spent years planning it, and thousands of people have been involved with it. And it links into Councillor Harris' question. What do you think has changed because we had the Commonwealth Games here for the work you've outlined?
Yeah.
So if we took that away, what was different about that presentation?
I think for us, probably twofold. I think one, many of the facilities that were developed are far more accessible because of the games and the funding that went into that. So Perry Barr train station is a really good example. Alexandra Stadium will be a really good example where the huge amount of funding that came with the one-off side of the event really helped to improve accessibility of those facilities for the future, for a long term, for citizens that we're working with. I think the second thing is what we were discussing with Councillor Harris about that sort of link within the council itself to ongoing work to make sure that the voice and needs of people with disabilities continues to be on that radar. That's ongoing, it has to be, because there's always a risk it drops down.
Because you talked about 400 community organisations as well.
Presumably those connections you've made as part of
We continue to work with those. Yeah.
outside the city council that So you're joined up within the city council, but also outside as well.
But really through our neighbourhood networks, because we have that locality presence that links with the community organisations. That reach group, if you like, was built upwards from that. So we continue to have those links into those organisations. Yeah, I think the games helped us to develop it further. So it existed before. It's got a wider focus now. But it existed pre-games. It's been enhanced, but it will continue. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you very much for your
appreciate it.
time. It's nice.
Come in.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we can have a discussion around some of the points after.
But delighted to. Thank you, Councillor
Thank you.
Deacon. Thank you.
This is just to
Work programme number 8.
look at the work programme now, which so we're on the 1st of February. The next meeting, which is on the 1st of March, we will be taking out evidence gathering from the work programme, simply because by that time we will have completed the evidence gathering for the inquiry, so that will be removed. But we will be looking at doing, as laid out, impact of financial pressures on arts and culture around the city. And this was requested by us as a committee previously. We have asked for some further information that might be discussed at this meeting. It depends on the officers and where they've got to on certain things to do with the culture strategy. And then on the 5th of April, we've got the the topic of enhancing tennis opportunities across the city. And you will see on that page as well, we have got a few items that we do need to slot into the work programme, but that will depend on officers getting back to us on that. So we will keep you updated with agendas and whatnot. But the next meeting will have a significant amount on the work programme. Any comments on the work programme? And then it was we, just to let you know, some of you did come, we had a visit to Alexander Stadium to review access to the stadium from in any kind of quarter, but also specifically around spectating. And we had that with Dave Wag, and also got the opportunity to talk about the future of the stadium as well, which sounds very exciting, and I can provide a written document to members as well on how that went if desired. And then we will be having a task and finish meeting for the inquiry after this as well. And just as way of an update, that has closed for evidence gathering from members of the public and any organisations acting on behalf of members of the public. And we have had a few sessions with people who wanted to provide further information based off the initial inquiry questions. Is there anything anyone wants to flag about the inquiry or ask about the inquiry? And it's just the date and time of the next meeting as discussed. It will be on Wednesday the 1st of March at 2 o'clock in here. No, committee room 6. I do apologise. I still don't know where some of the rooms are. And we've had no requests for call-ins or councillors' call for actions or petitions today. And we've had no urgent business either. So it's just to agree the relevant authority to myself and officers in between meetings. We're all happy to do that. Are we all content?
Yeah.
Brilliant. You may, we're just going to stop the broadcast and then you may leave.